Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello and welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Monday, March 31st. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 516 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. And today we've got some more New York Jets news to discuss as Aaron Glenn spoke to reporters earlier today. And I've got a few takeaways from what the new head coach had to say. Obviously, Muji also spoke to reporters yesterday. We had a video out on that. So if you want my thoughts on Muji's comments, you could check out yesterday's video. Of course, would appreciate all of your support. As always, though, before we begin, we've got to get into our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook. If you're looking to get in on any of these sports betting action, check out BetUS and use my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek, if you want any of the best and hottest tickets in sports or entertainment, check them out. Look for the green dots. Those are the good deals. Those are the tickets you want. And use code BUBS on sports at checkout for $20 off your first purchase and get yourself out to some awesome events. If you can buy a ticket, SeatGeek has it. Check them out. Link to download the mobile app in the description. And of course, our friends over at Huga House. If you want any of their awesome new arrivals or originals, check them out. Use code BUBS for 15% off any episode 516. Thank you, as always, for joining me. Last day of March. Tomorrow is April, another day closer to the NFL draft, and another day through this off season. So Aaron Glenn spoke to the media earlier today at the annual NFL League meeting, and I have some takeaways that I wanted to discuss today on the podcast. I'll first throw this first clip up here. This was Glenn just on his overall offseason approach and really the silence behind the Jets, right? Not a ton of reports, not a ton of rumors, under the radar signings, why he wants that to be the approach, and just some of his other thoughts on the offseason here as we sit on March 31st.
On the radar, kind of quiet. How do you like that? Is that by design? Is that the kind of way you want things to work?
It is by design. And listen, I'm a huge believer in just moving in silence and, letting things play out like they need to play out. I think our staff has done a really good job of that. Just overall let's just make the moves we need to make. Listen, this doesn't need to be a big hoopla of what we're doing. We just want to go about our business and coach these players and try to create an atmosphere for the players that's totally different from probably what they've been used to. And that's something I want to create just in general, of what type of players that we bring into the building, in the building environment for the most part. So, but you're right. I want to move in silence, man, and listen, just go about our business to go win some games, because you don't win in the offseason anyway.
Right.
I know everybody has these grades on free agency grades. They have grades on draft grades. And when you go back and look at them, they don't really mean crap, So the only thing that makes the difference is what you do during the season.
He's not wrong, especially with that last part about, free agency grades and winning in the offseason. Look, the New York Jets, right, I'll joke about it, but it's the truth. Over the last couple off seasons of the Saleh and Douglas regime, they were getting praised locally, New York media, and nationally about their signings, especially last year, right? All in, retooling with Rodgers, of course, making the Rodgers trade, all that stuff. And it ultimately ended with nothing, still no playoffs. Not saying that this is going to be a playoff team and this means that Aaron Glenn and Darren Mucci are going to succeed. But it is not easy to go through an offseason silent, no real reporting, not a ton of rumors, especially in this market where you're coaching the Jets, you're general manager for the Jets, you're a new regime. There's a lot of outside noise. There's a lot of questions about what's going to happen, and they've operated very much under the radar, which I don't think necessarily is a bad thing. Now, does it mean it's going to be a good thing and it's going to result in a ton of wins? Who knows, right? They got to ultimately prove it. And I do think free agency, right? There is the positive aspect of going out and signing young guys with upside, but there's also the negative side of it where there's still a lot of holes on this roster, and it puts a lot more pressure on you through the draft where you have to hit on your draft picks. But that's been the clear approach, and Glenn basically said it. That's also kind of been intentional. That they've flown under the radar. And we'll see how it all ends up playing out. But this has been a Jets team that has been national headlines for the last 2 years. And I don't think necessarily it's a bad thing for this culture, for this locker room, for the players in that building to kind of have some of that attention, some of that outside noise taken off them where they can focus a little bit more on just football, everything else inside the building, keep things inside the building inside, go about your business that way, as opposed to what it's been the last couple years, which has been an all-out circus. So that was kind of just Glenn on the approach and the silence and all that stuff. And I'll also say this about Aaron Glenn, and I've said this many times, and I think this kind of ties into that before we get on to some of his stuff that he had to say on the roster specifically. Glenn handles the media very well. Early signs here, and it's only been a couple press conferences, right? Intro press conference, NFL Combine, and today. It's only 3, times he's spoken to the media in. But early on, he commands himself very well in front of the media, handles the media very well. And I will say this, and I've said it many times already. This does not mean that he's going to succeed here. It doesn't mean the Jets are going to do a lot of winning. He could be great with the media, and the Jets could go 0-17 next year for all we know. But at least all we have right now is these 3 times that he has spoke, and he's handled the media well. And one of the biggest killers for Robert Saleh was the media ate him alive. He always tried to be everyone's friend, and I think that just also spoke to kind of the culture that was built. It was very not a whole lot of rules, not a whole lot of, that energy, that tenacity to him. It was just very boring and plain. Glenn doesn't bring that. Glenn is the opposite early here, where he's not going to take anything from the media. He's going to tell it like it is. He's going to kind of have that thing about him where, he's not going to let the media eat him alive. He's the right guy for this market. And we'll see if it carries over, but that's been something that early on you can get a pretty good gauge how somebody's going to do. He's able to handle this market here pretty early on with some of the questions, the way he responds, and the way he's able to take command and not necessarily let the media and outside factors control him. There are a couple examples of that today, really. Samini, he always be going back and forth with Samini a couple times, even going back to his intro press conference, right? They were discussing Jordan Travis. He talking about, I'm not a doctor. If he's here, he'll compete, all that stuff. Costello, right, about Garrett, doesn't care about what happened last year. That's in the past. Gets straight to the point, simple and short. And even talked about Sherwood, right? When they were like, oh, how does he fit the defense? He's like, he fits the defense. If he didn't, we wouldn't want him back. That kind of stuff. Just being, that way he carries himself with the media, I think is something that you can at least be encouraged by. Doesn't mean they're going to win a ton. Doesn't also mean they're going to lose a ton. It means nothing right now, but it's all we got. It's only March. Games don't start, of course, till September when it ultimately matters. So those are just some of the first takeaways there. On to the roster stuff. I feel like this is probably a good way to pivot. Talked about Sauce, talked about Garrett, 2 contract extensions. So I'll play these clips back to back. We'll start with Sauce. Interesting answer from Glenn. Thought this was a really something I wanted to put on the pod. Just hearing Glenn talk about Sauce, obviously his background as a corner, talking about him coming off of last year, and then also where things stand with Garrett. And then on the flip side, we'll discuss obviously some of the contracts and things like that. But here was Glenn on Sauce and Garrett.
How do you see, he came out of the gates his first couple of years. He did everything you could do.
Yep.
By most accounts, he had kind of a down year last year. How do you see it from your perspective?
Listen, I wish this league was a league where, man, you could just be on top every play, every year. And listen, I say that respectfully of the players that of the players in this league. I know on a first-hand basis, as I go through my career, man, there were some years that I didn't play as well. But numbers-wise, I mean, it seemed like it was good because I think his numbers, as far as I'm not talking about interceptions, I'm talking about his ability to deny, his coverage ability. I thought those were pretty good. And that's just part of this league. Man, this is a grown man's league. And every year, you're not going to be at the top of your game every year. The thing is, you thrive and you bust your ass to try to do that. The thing is that he has it in him. And you just said it. 2 years straight, he was a damn good player. So it's not like that's gone. It's just he didn't have the year that you guys want him to have. So he's going to have that again. Because who he is as a player. So I'm not worried about what happened last year with him. I don't think I know is the conversation that we've had and who he is as a man. And I know for a fact that he's going to get back to where he's going.
Spend time with Garrett yet at all?
Yes, I have.
He seemed unhappy last year at times. Did you get a sense that he wants to be a Jet, he's happy here, he's excited about the season?
Well, I wasn't here last year, so I don't care. I know right now, to have a lot of good conversation. That's all I care about.
He seems like he's in a good place when you talk to him?
Yeah, he's in a good place. So, I don't care what happened last year.
No, I got you.
So there was Glenn on Sauce and Garrett. The Sauce thing is obviously the most intriguing part of that. I thought that clip really, gives you some hope and confidence with Glenn working with Sauce, even though last year wasn't like an awful season for Sauce. It wasn't like Sauce was a terrible corner, but compared to his standards, 2 All-Pros back-to-back years, in his first year, and of course, year 2 sophomore season, year 3 was not that. But Glenn, from an interception perspective, you'd like to see Sauce turn into a little bit more of a playmaker, right? Turn the ball over. Really just the Jets defense in general. You'd like to see them turn the ball over a lot more. Something that's plagued the Jets the last couple of years. Defense has been great, but it's the turnovers. They don't force many turnovers. They sometimes just can't flat out recover fumbles. Turnover differential is always lopsided. It's something the Jets need to work on this year. Sauce being one of those guys, be able to, get more opportunities and get yourself in situations to capitalize on interceptions, playmaking, have that playmaking, ball hawking ability a little bit more. And I also think just the way Glenn, the man defense, the man-to-man, the way they run things, Glenn and Wilkes, I think fits Sauce a lot more and can help Sauce a lot. And just Glenn himself working with him one-on-one, I think, can hopefully help him where he bounces back. And of course, to the Garrett thing, I think if Garrett was still unhappy and requesting a trade, it feels like something like that would have happened by now. And I do think that something does get done with Garrett. And kind of hearing Glenn today, and even Muji as well yesterday, I could still see Sauce's extension happening. It just feels like this is going to be something that happens more so after the draft. You hear a lot of what Glenn and Muji talk about now is you heard a heavy, dose of we're focused on the draft, all that stuff, even to the free agency. Some of the free agency questions, they kind of seem to have pivoted, moved on from free agency and are fully in on, trying to pick up, not trying, but need to pick up multiple starters here in the first 2 days of the NFL draft. But you'll start some of the offseason workouts here in about a week or so, where you get some guys in the building, get to, have some in-person time with them, really get to know these guys a little bit more, Sauce and Garrett included. And I think that's when you could potentially see extensions get done. And it's the right thing to do. You want to lock up 2 blue chip pieces. You want to lock up 2 guys that have been great here the first 3 years, not only keep them happy, but most of all, of course, keep them here long-term. And I think that'll happen, only a matter of time as the offseason rolls on. But the Sauce quote, really interesting. Really intrigued to see how much more Glenn can get out of Sauce, given his cornerback background and some of the areas that Sauce needs to work on. Were some areas that were actually Glenn's strength as a player, which I think is certainly intriguing. Glenn also spoke a little bit more. I wanted to pull this clip up here on Justin Fields. Talked about going back to his Ohio State days and hoping to get some of that out of him here in New York.
Quiet confidence. You go back and watch him at Ohio State, big arm, understands how to run an offense when given the opportunity. and just a really, really good person, really intelligent person that knows football.
I think 3 of his 4 biggest rushes.
That word quiet confidence has been thrown around by Glenn a little bit. He even had an interview with Judy Batista the other day that we talked a little about yesterday, about the quiet confidence with him. And he talked about going back to his Ohio State days. Glenn also saw Justin Fields. And actually the follow-up question to that was about playing in his division, right? He played in Fields' division, of course, or coached rather in Fields' division with the Chicago Bears in the NFC North. And Fields actually had some success against them rushing wise. So he obviously knows what his rushing ability is. And you look back at, right, talked about some of that Ohio State tape and with Tanner Engstrand and what he could potentially bring. You've got to find a way. They feel like they can get more out of him from a passing perspective. They truly feel that they can tap into that untapped potential. And the Jets, of course, they're going to be positive and they're going to feel this way, but they really think, and Muji even mentioned it yesterday, that Fields can be Darnold, can be Baker Mayfield here. And the Jets obviously have a very steep hill to climb. Not only are you asking, this first-time offensive coordinator to fix Justin Fields, but you're also asking the Jets just in general, who have been known for failing quarterbacks as opposed to elevating quarterbacks, to elevate a guy like Justin Fields. But we say it all the time. That's why Justin Fields was the right pick for this team and the best option, because of the potential, because of the rushing ability, the possibility that has for this offense, and also the fact that he's still young, 26. And you can trust him to be a bridge, and it's worst case scenario, that's all he is. Best case scenario, right, you stumble into your long-term answer. I also think that just completely takes the Jets out of a running at quarterback at number 7, even though that never seemed realistic. But there was that couple-week stretch there of, do they trade up for Cam Ward? Oh, if Shedeur falls. Oh, what about Jackson Dart? No, they're this high on Fields. They believe in him. Engstrand's, going to cater the offense to him, build the offense around him for him. He's the starter. Right? Yeah, obviously competition, all that stuff, but he is going to be the week 1 starter. It'll take, I think, completely rules out too that possibility of a quarterback at 10 or even round 1. Mid-round, fine. First round now. Never seemed realistic, but I think really now, even more so. Some other thing that Glenn mentioned I wanted to discuss a little bit, right? Talked about young man's game, young talent, wants to really infuse competition. That's a big thing, I think, just in general with this culture that Glenn's trying to build, right? This is a new regime. What happened last year, what happened 2 years ago, it doesn't matter to him. You go out there, training camp, who performs best, who performs well in the games, those are guys who are going to play. He's new here, so everybody else pretty much is new. I think that's going to be, you're going to see a lot of that where maybe you see some of these surprising depth guys play bigger roles this year. We'll see, but talked a lot about young players, competition, all that stuff. Kind of relates back to that free agency plan that they had where they brought in a lot of depth pieces, not necessarily starters. Likes the running back room, right? Brees, Braylon Allen, Isaiah Davis, excited for that. I think there's, of course, a lot of intrigue there just based off of what this Jets offense could look like, right? Brees and Fields, a lot of running, a lot of, heavy personnel. You saw some positives out of Allen last year. You saw some positives during the end of the year out of Isaiah Davis. So a running back room that I think you can go into the season feeling excited about. I will say this is still so strange to me. And you kind of think about it today and you hear the comments. Maybe it's more so just trying to up his trade value, but you got Glenn praising Lazard's blocking. Even yesterday, you hear Darren Muji talk about restructuring his contract, if you read between the lines, talking about him and trying to keep him here. I still find it so hard to believe that Lazard, number one, he would want to be here and this new regime would want him back. You do start to wonder if this is the Jets trying to put this out there to try and get some value in return for him. Like, hey, we're trying to keep him, hey, we like him. You want, if you want him, what can we get? Like that kind of thing, trying to boost up his value. Because I just can't see a world where Allen Lazard is still on this roster. And maybe they do like him. Again, I talked about this yesterday. Maybe this is more of something they're keeping him on the roster. And depending on how the draft falls, if they feel great about the receiver they get in the draft, then do they move on? Or do they want another veteran? Who knows? But Lazard's still here, and from what they're saying, they seem to like him. I don't quite understand that, don't quite believe that, but only time will tell. We'll see. If he's out there week 1, then I guess they see something in him. I don't quite know what that is, but only time will tell. Jermaine's working hard to get back. He talked about very high on Jermaine, connection with him, coached him back at the Senior Bowl in 2022. So that was something of note. And also just mentioned very heavy draft focus, talked a lot about the draft. Again, and I think Glenn and Muji realized that. And I think that's kind of their plan with this roster, right? You kind of supplement through free agency and build through the draft. That's at least the approach that they've taken here in the first offseason, right? Not a ton of big time free agents, not a ton of starters that you've brought in from free agency. Instead, you look at the draft and you're looking at starting right tackle. You're going to need starting tight end. You're going to need another receiver, like defensive lineman potentially. Like you look, safety. And I think they kind of recognize that importance as well of building more so through the draft and supplementing in free agency, at least so far this offseason. So that was Glenn. One other quote that Woody Johnson said, he called the NFLPA report cards, which gave him an F, the lowest graded owner in the NFL, 32 out of 32 teams, bogus. He called it bogus. Did say he's going to try and be a better owner, still improve, right? He said a lot of those things. I just don't know how it's bogus when it's coming from the players. This isn't like it's the reporters. It's coming directly from the players who were in and out of that building last year every single day, not anybody else. So I don't know how it's bogus when it's coming from the players. It just like every time Woody speaks, he's just he's lost. He's lost. And I don't want to harp on this too much, but my message again to Woody and all Jets fans, every time he talks, you just cringe. But I'll also throw this out there. Just step away. Just back off. Let's not hear, just back off, please. Say it. I've said it many times. Say it again. Just let Darren Muji, Aaron Glenn do their thing. Back off. And enough of all this other nonsense. Like, it's not bogus. You're a terrible owner. Just move on. The last 2 years are in the past. Back off and let the football people do their thing. Don't meddle. It's the biggest concern. We always, all concerns, the biggest concern is Woody meddling. It's the biggest concern. He won't change, but at least for now, back off and let these Glenn and Muji do their thing. That's all you could say. So that'll do it. Another episode in the books. Let me know what your thoughts on Aaron Glenn and his comments made today. We'll have I got a couple episodes lined up. Want to discuss a couple different topics this week on the show. So we'll break that down throughout the week. Want to get into some more AVT stuff. Want to go a little bit deeper into why I feel it's the right move. Want to do some more draft stuff. Also want to get into a little bit more on Sauce and just the way that Glenn and the defense actually benefits him, and just wanted to get into some numbers and metrics on that. So we got some cool episodes planned out here for the rest of the week and into next week that I want to dive into. So stay tuned for that. We'll have a lot more content coming your way. Draft month tomorrow, April 1st. Off season rolling by pretty quickly here. So a lot to look forward to here over the next month. Thank you as always for joining me. Until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.